last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Dark Matters Radio, heard exclusively on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And as always tonight, my two co-hosts, Mr. Mark Center, bring him on, and Mr. Gary Cassell. Gary,
wait, I haven't gotten dressed.
You're not that funny, Gary. You're not that funny. You're really not. But hey, yeah, we are back. We've had quite a bit of really rotten weather recently here in sunny Southern California. However, today it has gotten nice. I was promised by my AI assistant, Ms. Alexa, that we were going to have 70-degree weather. And Vic was, my wife was out earlier with the two dogs, taking them for their constitutional. And she came back in and said, yeah, boy, when you're in the sun, it is nice. Now, having said that, by the end of the week, we're supposed to have more rotten rain. So with that being said, that means I've got to get a gardener guy out here before I get dinged by the county for brush clearance. And with all this rain, boy, we had some brush. And God, what else? I guess that's it right now for a short catch up.
Any new rocks from Bailey?
Every day. Every day. No, Vic will be in there and Bailey will run outside, come in with a rock or sometimes a branch, okay? And she'll sit there staring at Vic. And the bottom line is Vicky will tell her, drop that. And she won't do it until Vicky pulls out a treat. The dog has her trained. And then she'll drop it. So, hey, that's what you get with a beagle, I guess. Mark, how about you, buddy?
I was watching a parrot sing "You Got Another Thing Coming" on YouTube today, and he did a pretty good job. He did a pretty good job. A guy was playing a Les Paul in the background, and the parrot was walking around on the table, and it was close, for a parrot. It was close. You got another thing coming. It was good. It was a great way to turn to April Fool's Day.
Yeah. That is true. I was talking to Gary earlier today, and he said, I've got some questions I'd like to bounce off you. And I said, about what? He said, well, there's actually a number of things. He said, you guys are all often talking about things like Göbekli Tepe and some other stuff. Man, I'd really like to ask you some questions. Well, Gary, here we are, dude.
Will I ever get hair down below?
I don't know. Maybe.
I went through puberty 45 years ago. Anyway.
Yeah, well.
No, there's I don't know, because I'll hear you guys talk about it, and I really feel like a novice because
well, you are. You are. You are a
I mean,
novice.
I have read and everything on UFOs since I was a kid. And but then you guys start talking, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything. I was busy learning math and biology, and I don't know anything about some of these things. Like Göbekli Tepe just really amazes me. The stonework. And when I started reading more about the archaeological dig on this place, I'm like, how does this place exist? And how is it in Peru that they were able to have rocks carved so closely in that wall that you can't fit a razor between them?
Megalithic. It's megalithic construction. Well,
It just amazes me.
in a way, now this is my opinion. A lot of people may disagree with it, and if they do, well, they're wrong. But but a lot of it can be traced back to something that is becoming more and more pervasive, especially in this culture, and that is the Anunnaki. Now, Zecharia Sitchin was the man that wrote a series of books that today collectively are known as the Earth Chronicle series. And he started out with the 12th planet. Several other titles in that collection include one called Genesis Revisited. And that, incidentally, is the book that caused me, when I had the opportunity, and this is about 1990, 91, when I met retired Colonel Dr. Marina Popovich, a Soviet Union Red Air Force colonel and pilot. Of course, by that time, the Iron Curtain had collapsed. But she was over here visiting on a tour, and she went from LA down to Arizona, and we flew down to see her speak. And while down there, I had an opportunity literally over 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, to extensively interview her. Now, in Genesis Revisited, there are several things in there that Sitchin had basically included in this book. Now, first, you got to know Sitchin, his family originally came from the old Soviet Union. Okay, he was born in the Ukraine. His family and he were Jewish. Somehow they were able to get the heck out of there. Sitchin ended up going to the United Kingdom, to the UK, where he attended and graduated from the London School of Economics. And his passion, all right, was ancient history. It was ignited when he was a young kid attending religious school, all right, being taught by a rabbi. And he had a lot of questions and asked a lot of uncomfortable things that kind of flummoxed the rabbi. And as Sitchin told me one time, finally this man got exasperated and basically told him to sit down and shut up. Well, that just ignited his curiosity. Now, as I was in college, the academia at that time was stating that Mesopotamia, ancient Sumeria, was the first civilization that blossomed on the plains of Mesopotamia, which today encompass parts of Iran, Syria, and Iraq. Now, there were a series of cities there that went back 6,000 years. And the schools taught that that was the world's first civilization. Basically, we went from hunter-gatherers, okay, Stone Age people, running around, chasing down animals, spearing them so they could eat, that type of thing. The women out collecting wild grasses and nuts and berries so they could have a meal. Well, that never made sense to me, especially when you consider that even though Mesopotamia was only approximately 6,000 years old, the city of Jericho was traced back to 9,000 years ago. But very few people ever mention Jericho. Well, Sitchin, through his scholarship and the fact that he could read and translate ancient Sumerian, was curious about this. Where did these people, the Sumerians, get their knowledge from? Because when they basically blossomed on the banks of the rivers there that ran through Samaria with their various cities, they already had government by right of kingship. Kingship was handed to them. They had mathematics. They had astronomy. They had medicine. They could raise and run herds of domestic animals, cattle. They had animal husbandry. And they had the knowledge to create irrigation for their farming fields. Now, where did this come from? I mean, if this was the first civilization, well, when they showed up there, they had all these arts of civilization already in place. Now, that is something that mainstream academia has never wanted to touch either. Well, according to the Sumerians, they said that these arts of civilization were lowered to them from heaven by the Anunnaki, which they regarded as gods. Okay? Now,
and all of this was
Anunnaki,
translated from the Sanskrit, right?
well, from the original text and scripts,
Right.
yes. The Anunnaki, what that means is the translation is those who from heaven to earth came. Now, today, you and I, we look at that, and the only thing that makes sense to us is that they were off-world visitors. But they showed up there. They even, according to many texts, came down within the cities. The people actually saw these beings. And the high god, or the commander, okay, if you will, was a being called An, or Anu. But he had two chief sons. Enlil was the first, and Enki. Now, Enlil was a son of a bitch, all right? He was a tyrant, a strict disciplinarian. He believed that the human race basically were scum. But they were scum, according to the text, that were created by the Anunnaki. For what reason? All right. Well, according to Sitchin and in his books, and believe me, I'm giving you a very rough overview to really get a sense of what I'm telling you. It behooves you, if you have interest, to find these books and read them, starting with the 12th planet. But they came here in search of minerals and materials to Earth, okay, for one primary thing, and a lot of other things, of course, but the primary material they were looking for was gold. Now, what in the heck would they do with gold? Okay.
Well, it's a great conductor, and it's perfect for all sorts of things dealing with electronics.
Yeah, but that's not why they came originally. Why they came originally, their planet, which was identified as a planet called Nibiru, all right, which is in a tremendously vast orbit around our sun, an orbit that, according to Sitchin, is roughly 3,600 years as we count time to make one revolution around the star. Now, the Sumerians, all right, in many of their texts and tablets, I said one of the things that they know about was astronomy. They have detailed representations of our solar system, including the planets going around our sun. Now, how could they have even known that? All right, well, it's unlikely they did unless they were told by these visitors that came here. And those visitors were looking for gold because on their planet Nibiru, they were having an ecological catastrophic event. Their atmosphere was in distress. They were losing atmosphere. Apparently, also, ozone was being depleted. And the gold was to seed their atmosphere, which would help reflect these dire radiation and sun rays that were afflicting them. Now, that's a nice story. I'm not a scientist. I don't completely understand that. But one thing I do understand is the fact that, for example, in South Africa, a gold mine, ancient, I might add, was discovered down there that was dated in excess of 300,000 years ago. Now, if human beings were even running around then, all right, what in the world would they have done with gold? There was nothing they could do with it. For one thing, it's too soft to create tools. And everything, if there were anybody running around with any tools, they were rocks and sticks. And number two, it's impossible to create weapons with gold. So no, they weren't mining that. Humans weren't mining that for themselves. However, the Anunnaki very well may have. And when they first came and they were surveying for places to discover gold, okay, they were using workers of their own called the Ajiji. All right, this is a Sumerian word for the workers. But after a long time, the Ajiji, according to the text, rebelled against their Anunnaki overlords. And the Anunnaki then decided to create the atom, the first worker. They, according to the text, took early ancestors of humanity, genetically worked on them, tinkered with them, used some of their own DNA in it, and they created what today is Homo sapiens sapien, you and I, all right? But here's the kicker. Originally, human beings were considered nothing more than a slave race. Now, the Anunnaki were also apparently pretty randy, all right? They were not opposed to taking human beings for their own sexual pleasure. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest kings to come out of Sumeria was from the city of Uruk, King Gilgamesh. And there is an epic poem that was discovered talking all about Gilgamesh, all right, which is a name famous in history. This guy, all right, was described as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. Now, the Anunnaki, by all accounts, were of giant stature, maybe 12 feet tall. Gilgamesh was described as being of giant stature. According to the text, his father, Gilgamesh's father, was a human being that one of the female Anunnaki took to her bed. She, of course, was divine. He was born, okay, later to become king. And the guy was, well, he was quite a son of a bitch, if you believe the text. He was demanding of his people. They began crying out to the gods to please take this guy aside, have a talk to him. He would go to, for example, people that were getting married. Now, this is something that even happened in medieval England, where the king or the baron or whomever, if they were elite, could have first crack at the wife before the husband did. Well, this was something that Gilgamesh was guilty of quite frequently. So finally, according to this epic poem, the gods conferred and they created something equal in strength and tenacity to Gilgamesh. And his name was Enkidu, okay, or the wild man. And which I got to tell you, when I read that, the first thing that came to my mind, okay, this guy sounded almost like a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot type guy. But Gilgamesh heard about this wild man rampaging through the forest, living with the animals. He went out to track this guy down, and they ended up having a fight that, according to the text, lasted about 3 days. But the long and the short of it was they ended up becoming fast friends and bosom buddies. Okay. But this is some fascinating stuff. Do either of you guys want to jump in here anywhere? Or?
No, I'm just amazed at what's going on here. And that because this is some of the earliest writing ever found and translated.
Right.
And the stuff that they say in this stuff, it just kind of blows my mind. And I'm surprised how little about this I had known before you and I became friends, and I started paying more attention and started watching that show that I don't know if you like or not, but I do watch the show Ancient Aliens, even though I do chuckle when they go, some theorists, or what do they call them?
Alien theorists.
Yeah, alien creation theorists. But I'm like, you keep saying this. Who are they? I want to know who they are. I don't like people that say they and then don't tell me who they are.
Right.
I know Mark doesn't like it either.
I hate that show.
And I hope everybody does dial in to Mark's number. His number is 867-5309.
Absolutely.
And I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. When I first signed on tonight, Mark, well, he used to be Mark, said, from now on, you will address me as Marcia.
Marcia.
So, Marcia.
I don't like that show. I don't like most of those shows. I do like the D'Antonio show. The proof is out there. It's one of the lesser.
I do enjoy that, and of course, our friend is on that show occasionally.
Right,
although
right.
He wasn't on the last episode.
Well, he's not on every one, but I will say that the folks out there, if they want to, and we've been trying to get this guy on. He hasn't uploaded anything in a couple of months. He may be on a trip somewhere, because he actually puts feet on the ground in Egypt and places like that, is Bright Insight on YouTube. Kicks ass on Giorgio and his crazy hair, because this guy actually does the work. Also, Mystery History and Mystery History Part 2. I like those. They're a little bit more out there. The Mystery History, not nearly as good as Bright Insight, but I like those stories, Don. And I know that a lot of it's based on the Sanskrit and all that, but I'm more into, Bulbeck and all the rest of it, where it's actually physically in front of you and then you can look at it. Same like with the Coral Castle, right? Where you can actually go look at this stuff and say, what the hell is going on here and how did they do this, right? But my question that I've never asked you, Don, is most of the time everybody's talking about either Africa or the Middle East, Turkey, etc., right? But in China and Japan, what we would consider modern man, if you believe what the scientists say, started to populate in those two places 40,000 years ago, right? And they have a lot of amazing technology and stuff there as well. And yet it seems like the Western scientists or the shows on TV, they rarely talk about stuff that goes on in the East. It's always focused in these other countries.
Well, the Japanese are similar in many ways with their mythologies, their histories. They basically credited, a female goddess, which was associated with the sun, with the goddess that basically brought human beings to Japan and that area. If you read into any of their history and their mythology, in many ways, it's basically the same all over. Now, Gerry had asked about Göbekli Tepe,
Mm-hmm.
and I started out talking about Sumeria. And Sumeria can be dated back to roughly 4,500 BC, all right, which is roughly a little over 6,000 years ago. But obviously, human beings, you and I, Homo sapiens sapiens, have been around a heck of a lot longer than that. So what were we doing? Were we all nothing but bands of hunters and gatherers running across the landscape, living in caves? Hell no. All right. If you look at our own very recent history, and when I'm saying look at our recent history, I'm talking about here in the Americas, the Industrial Revolution began at the very beginnings of the 19th century, the early 1800s. One of the first things that popped up, a steam engine was invented. All right. Now, prior to that, it was horses and manual labor. You wanted to go from point A to point B. If you had a horse, you climbed on top of it and the horse walked you there, or you walked there. But suddenly, here was an invention that could be applied to a ship and eventually to a machine that ended up being trains and railroads. And we were off and running. The 19th century was a very prolific time for innovation and science, all right? Before the century was out, we went from Pony Express rider to the telegraph system, where we could sit somewhere in New York, and we could send almost an instantaneous message to a place like Chicago, okay, in mere minutes using this new technology, the telegraph. There were many other things coming. Before the century was out, the internal combustion engine was invented, and the horseless carriage, automobiles, made their presence known. And after the very beginning of the 20th century, within 3 years, we went from mankind dreaming of it for centuries, wanting to be able to fly like a bird, to the Wright brothers' first flight in a powered aircraft in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, okay, using gasoline engines and wings. And within, 12 to 14 years from that point, World War I had already erupted in Europe, and before you know it, the various countries, the Brits, the French, the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians, had air forces where they were battling in the sky, okay? First, pilots shooting at each other with pistols, and ultimately machine guns. Now, my point is, look at how fast that technology happened. Now, there's not a hell of a lot of difference between a brand new human being born today and a human being born 6,000 years ago. What was the difference? Well, there's a researcher, writer, journalist out there today by the name of Graham Hancock. I'm sure almost anybody that is interested in this type of information knows who Graham Hancock was. And as a matter of fact, on Netflix right now, he has an amazing series that he was excoriated by the mainstream academic and archaeologist communities for this series called The Ancient Apocalypse. All right. Now, what the hell was he talking about? Well, it's very simple, and this is where I'm headed right now. 6,000 years ago was by no means the beginning. Actually, if you knew truly, and I don't, but I theorize, okay, the human history goes back much, much, much further. However, we are truly a species with amnesia because we don't know quite what happened that reset our civilization. Now, if you've ever read the Bible, if you've ever read the Quran, if you've ever read anything about various mythologies all over the globe, they all have one underlying theme, and that was a catastrophic flood happened that basically wiped out and caused to disappear millions upon millions of miles of land, islands, even perhaps continents by this global flood. Now, the Bible will tell you that God used that to punish the evil humankind. It's much more likely, and today it's believed, that it happened during a period today known collectively as the Younger Dryas event. Now, this went back roughly 11,600 years ago. And there have been points of interest found in several places across, well, from North America to Greenland to Europe, where it is believed that fragments of a comet or an asteroid impacted the Earth. And this is something that most people today are not even aware of. But it's believed this came from the Taurus meteor storm that we fly through every year. Today, it's believed that that was the culprit, that a big chunk of it came down and hit the Earth. And when it did, it impacted in North America and perhaps Northern Europe, which at that time were covered by extensive ice sheets, as much as 2 and 3 miles thick. And with this horrific impact, it caused basically flooding because the ice broke up, began melting, and for roughly 1,000 years, as a result of whatever it was that happened, we had another mini ice age. Okay. Now, that 11,600 year date is very important for several reasons. Now, Atlantis is something we've all heard about. I've heard about it most of my life, read about it in books and what have you. Hell, back in the late 50s, the early 60s, they even made some science fiction movies about Atlantis. But the bottom line was, in Greece, it was the philosopher Plato that first brought the concept of Atlantis to Western culture. In his Timaeus and I believe it's Critias dialogues that he had written, where he was trying to describe the perfect state, all right, the perfect government, and so forth. Well, his ancestor was a man by the name of Solon, who had traveled over a century before Plato's time to Egypt, which at that period of time, we're talking about roughly 600 BC, at that time, Egypt was considered the most academically gifted nation state around. And Solon had traveled there basically on a hunt for data, information about various things. He ended up going to a temple in the area known as Sais. And he introduced himself to the priest there, and started asking them a series of questions. And they told Solon, and it was, by the way, engraved on all their temple walls, this history, that 9,000 years before that time, 600 BC, so that would have been 9600 BC. At that time, okay, there was a tremendous catastrophic event that happened that swallowed up this advanced culture that the Egyptians called Atlantis. But the priest also told Solon that was not the first time that something like that had happened. There seemed to be a cyclic rate every so many thousands of years that something would happen that basically would reset human civilization back to ground zero. Now, at that time, okay, when Atlantis allegedly was destroyed. All right. Who knows how many millions of people died? We do know that it was lethal here in North America. We know that because in effect, it wiped out the human culture that was here at the time, the Clovis people. All right. I'm sure if you know anything about archaeology, you know about these beautiful stone spear points and arrow points that somebody, okay, had figured out how to create, all right, for hunting. And at that time, when the Clovis people were still here on the continent, we had unimaginably vast herds of all types of animals roaming across North America. Giant bison, giant ground sloths, horses, and elephants or great woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, the smilodon, which they've haunted my dream forever, by the way. And these animals basically disappeared in an eye blink. Now, let me give you a little story that I personally discovered myself. And this is back when I was a kid. My mother's dad, his oldest brother died in 1959. And this guy had been a subscriber to National Geographic since about the turn of the 20th century. Now, after he was dead and buried, my dad got in touch with this guy's wife and ended up buying all his stored National Geographic magazines, brought them home. My God, there were hundreds and hundreds of them. And when I was a kid, I used to peruse those things, okay? The pictures were great in those. And I came across an article from the 1930s, and if I remember correctly, it was around 1935, 36, or 37, in then Soviet Stalinist Russia, in Siberia, all right, some Russian hunters came across a vast, gigantic junkyard of bones, okay, unimaginably, where thousands and thousands of animals had been killed. Nobody knew how or why. But here was the thing. As more and more research was done, it was discovered that these animals had somehow, and they were mammoths, by the way, woolly mammoths, had been picked up by something, and of course it could have only been the wind, and basically were smashed apart. Now, later in the permafrost, some of these animals were found that were still intact. And these animals, and I'm sure you've heard this, these animals were found with undigested food in their mouths and their stomachs because they were flash frozen. Now think about that. An animal that weighs tons and tons suddenly flash frozen. What could have conceivably done that? Well, had we have been hit by an asteroid or a comet, all right, what that would have done to the weather, number one, there would have been vast, vast winds generated. And it's believed those winds were in excess of 1,000 miles an hour that picked those herds of mammoths up and basically just destroyed them. Now, when all of this was happening, all right, roughly 11,600 BC, it's very probable, I'm going to say probable, that there were advanced cultures around. Now, what makes me say that? Well, here is a book called The Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Now, everybody has heard or should have heard of something called the Piri-Reis map, right? You guys have heard of that.
Yeah, we talked about that previously.
Yeah, the Piri-Reis map was drawn by a Turkish admiral and cartographer by the name of Piri-Reis. And it seems to show that not only this map, which incidentally was on a gazelle hide, not only did this map show the southern part of South America, but what could only be Antarctica,
Yep.
off to the side that was not under ice. Okay. It showed the actual topography. Now, later, in the latter 1950s, National Geographic went down there in conjunction with the U.S. Navy, did a lot of radar scans, and they discovered that a lot of what was on that map was a perfect match for what they discovered under the ice. Now, Piri-Reis stated that he got his material from many older maps that went back perhaps to the very library in Alexandria, the Great Library of Alexandria, which ended up being burned down. God only knows what data was in there going back thousands and thousands of years.
It falls into that thing we've talked about previously with the Great Reset.
Yes, absolutely. This suggests that ancient mariners were extremely familiar with the entire globe. And some of that stuff apparently could only be observed from the air. But nobody had airplanes then, right? I mean, we don't know. We do know that at the beginning of the 20th century or the last part of the 19th century, an analog computer was discovered in a shipwreck off Greece that everybody said would have been impossible to have. This technology was simply not available then, but yet there it was. All right. The Ankatiri mechanism. I'm sure I'm butchering the actual name. I'm not good at that, but it was discovered, it was found, and later, after it was extensively researched and x-rayed, some people tried to duplicate that, and it was believed to be an analog computer for astronomical events like eclipses and the proper time to celebrations of the gods and religion, that type of thing. But regardless, it was there. Now, 11,600 years ago is when Göbekli Tepe was dated in the aftermath of the end of the Younger Dryas event. And if you're not sure what that is, I would suggest you go up on Google and you check it out, because there was
I
a
remember
tremendous event
reading about the fact that they believe it was theory is that there was an aerial event that happened that caused decimation, a nuclear winter that cooled everything down.
That was Younger Dryas. Now, I interviewed several years ago an archaeologist on Dark Matters Radio, And we started talking about Göbekli Tepe. Now, Göbekli Tepe was not an overnight event. As a matter of fact, the actual complex, and it's a temple complex, okay, may have gone on for close to a millennium. But there were groups of people coming through there. Now, mainstream academia would have you believe that one morning, all these hunter-gatherers woke up and decided, why don't we create this temple? And then they went out and they quarried rocks and blah, 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 brought it back and built this place. Bullshit. All right. This stuff was obviously created by artisans, people that knew what they were doing. And this was in the aftermath of this catastrophic event. Where did these people come from? Well, I suggested to this lady archaeologist that they sounded like survivors, like refugees moving through. And she absolutely agreed with me. They had come from another place, perhaps Atlantis, okay? They had artisans there. These columns, if you go up and you look at the photographs of this area, and if you look at Graham Hancock's series, Ancient Apocalypse, there's one column, it's in a T shape, roughly, I think, close to 20 feet tall, that have astronomical positions of constellations and stars engraved into this thing. And this is spooky. It also shows what is believed to be an object coming down from the heavens. This is engraved in this column. And at the bottom of the column is a human form without a head, signifying that whatever this thing was, it killed people. Now, when you come across stuff like that, these people from millennia ago were trying to tell the future that, hey, be aware, be careful, look at the skies, because sometimes bad things come from the skies. Now, when I was a kid, all right, I, of course, knew about Halley's Comet. Actually, I could not wait until it was in the 1980s when it showed up again. I could not wait to see this thing. To me, seeing a comet, oh, God, that was something I dearly wanted to experience. And then I started reading that throughout human history, comets were harbingers of evil things coming, and I could never understand that. The Chinese referred to them as dragons, and the Japanese, okay, evil dragons coming across the sky. And I could never figure that out until, as I got older, I became more and more immersed in a lot of this history and mythology that it finally shone clear. They knew when they saw a comet in the sky that, boy, this could be some serious business if it hits us. And obviously it did. Now, over the years, a lot of people have done research on, did something like this happen? And they found the evidence in ice cores drilled out of places like Greenland, the Arctic, the Antarctic, because this was a global event. So yeah, I'm telling you, this stuff to me, there's no doubt in my mind that the human race goes back many, many millennia, and God knows how advanced we may have been at one point before, well, civilization at that point was destroyed. You guys got anything to add to it?
It's time for a commercial break.
Yes,
that is a master's class in some amazing history, Don. Man, that was amazing. I just sit and I'm like taking note in my head. Remember this shit.
Well, let's take a break, and we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dark Matters Radio tonight with Mr. Gerry Cassell, Mr. Mark Center, and yours truly. We are heard exclusively on KGRAdb. We'll be back after this. And we are back.
I wanted to point out something that because Mark brought up Baalbek earlier with the temples.
You mean Marcia?
Yeah, Marcia. I'm sorry, Marcia had brought up the temples at Baalbek, including what's one Bacchus. Yeah, and researchers had done a 3D scan of this thing, and a 3D artist took it and showed that the pillars don't go up. This is very common for Roman architecture. They don't actually go straight up. They all lean slightly inward all the way around it, that if they all were to continue on past it going into the sky, they would eventually crisscross. And that's a fascinating design showing just a really odd understanding of Earth gravity in their design.
The Baalbek monument, I guess if you want to call it that, has always been, through academia, attributed to the Romans. The Romans never talked about it. They never claimed they built it. For one thing...
But the similarity to Roman architecture is really noticeable, though.
They built on top of what was there.
Oh, what was already there, yeah.
Okay. One of those stones,
which is like the Temple Mount,
1,000 tons. 1,000 tons. We couldn't manipulate that today. Okay? 1,000 tons. My God. Do you have any conception of the massiveness of that thing? Somebody else put it there a long time ago. All right.
It wasn't one of the stones like gigantic, and they're like, how does a human move such a large rock?
Exactly. 1,000 tons. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Mark, you looked into this a lot. Do you have anything to say about it?
Well, I guess what can, again, when we go back to the UFOs and the UAPs and all that stuff, this should be a much bigger concern to people, I think, because there's probably a connection there, right? Anyway, but it's there. It can be looked at. It can be measured. It can be, quantified. And yet the same people the same types of people that people look to for answers on UAPs and UFOs have no answer about this, nor do they want to answer it, right? Because it'll just blow up in their face because of all the education that they've had and such. It's like, well, we can't answer this. We don't even want to look into this because it's going to blow us out of the water.
That's like going to a Washington press briefing and asking the secretary, the Washington press secretary, if the president has dementia.
Right.
You get blown right out of the office.
So there's this thing about the younger Dryas. I don't know that much about it, but I did some math on this, and over 290 years, so we'll say 300 years. So over 300 years, the meltwater rise was 45 feet, 6 foot a year. So if you're looking into that, I'm not saying about an explosion or a meteor or whatever, but the water rise that they're saying on Wikipedia, which obviously can be believed, is 6 foot a year for 300 years.
Going
Meaning
back when? Going back when?
11,000 years. So
Okay. All right. At the time. At the time.
at the
It was
time,
attributed 200 to 400 feet in depth. The ocean
right. That's not what they say up here. Up here, they say that over 14,200 calibrated years ago, it raised 45 feet over 300 years.
Bullshit.
Well, I'm just saying what that.
No, I'm telling you, that's bullshit.
Well, then again, the academics on Wikipedia don't have it right. Okay, that's fine. My question is that if we have the Tunguska situation where we know where whatever that was hit and it flattened a bunch of trees and all that, if we have a similar or maybe even bigger thing happen 11,000, 12,000, 13,000 years ago, I'm thinking it would be at least that big or much bigger. So where do we look for that impact?
Well, Tunguska happened in June of 1908.
Yeah.
And it did not impact. It was an airburst.
Right.
Okay.
But look at all the damage.
But whatever caused the retreat and melting of the glaciers that happened over 11,000 years ago did hit.
And where is that impact?
Greenland. Under the ice, they discovered a crater, okay, that I forget now how deep this crater went, but it's close to 100 miles in diameter.
So big. How big is the crater in Arizona? I think.
Okay, that's down in Winslow.
Because I've been there before, but I didn't want to pay the money because they wanted like $25 to walk up there and look down at the hole, and I said, I don't think I'm going to pay that. But it just seemed like a ripoff to me. It's like $5, all right. I'll pay the $5 and I'll go take a look, but I'll go to the Grand Canyon for nothing. So.
Yeah. No kidding. They wanted $25 to go up and look in the hole.
It was outrageous, I thought it was, and this was probably 20 years ago, and I just thought it was outrageous. So I decided, but it's a fairly big hole, right?
Yeah.
It may not be 100 miles across, but I'm just wondering if in respect to that one by Winslow, how many of those would fit in the one in Iceland or something like that.
You see, here's the thing about Earth. Wind, rain, the weather are constantly working on things like craters. All right.
Yeah.
And so how do they verify these things? Well, one way is through ice core samples.
Right. Then they talk about
that's one way. Another way is, well, in Greenland, discovering this thing beneath the ice, all right, where weathering can't get to it right now because of the ice sheet, all right, that thing is still there, basically pristine. Now, I don't know if I said this because I was trying to get to it, but the Taurid meteor shower, that's where it's believed that the impactor came from. All right. And it's still up there. There's still a lot of junk in it. And from October to November, through the month of November, it's a crapshoot every year.
Right.
We're playing Russian roulette.
Right.
Whether you know it or not. Were these huge ancient cities abandoned, or were they taken away? I'm not sure what you. Oh,
well, what's that new technology they have where they can look through the desert fauna, or I'm sorry, the forest fauna down in Peru, and they can show these giant cities that they never could see before. It's a new technology they have now
Oh,
from
the
the
flora.
satellite.
Yeah, the megaflora.
So they can look through that now, and they can show that. And it's incredible, right? I mean, it is incredible how much there has been built that we don't know about still.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, now there are a lot of reasons that many of these cities suddenly were abandoned. Okay. Of course, not having been there, many of these are speculations. What happened to the inhabitants? You got these beautiful cities, okay, laid out pyramids and temples and God only knows what all. And suddenly it's a ghost town.
Yeah, like the Mayans.
Exactly.
Well, a good example as well is
it could have been a change of climate. Now, what would change climate? Well,
SUV.
An astronomical impact, volcanism, volcanoes blowing up, okay, throwing millions of tons of soot in the air, causing basically a nuclear type winter for several years. Do you know in 1816? Do you know what's fascinating about that date? Do you guys know anything about that? 1816?
It's not
in the United States.
It's not ringing the bell.
They call that the year without a summer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And
it had a mini ice age. Yeah.
Suddenly, and nobody could figure out what the hell happened. Okay. The sun basically went away. The crops rotted in the ground. It was cold, even snow in June, July, August. Okay. It was an aberration. Well, it turned out to be an event from a volcano. Might have been Krakatoa that popped its lid then. Okay. And basically stole away the summer. Same thing happened in 536 AD. If you were around in 536 AD, which was roughly a century or so after the Romans basically abandoned Great Britain, went back to Italy, all right, that was a year from hell. It's believed the same thing happened. Volcanoes popped, which drove rats, okay, in vast hordes, many of them infected with the
fleas.
Black Death,
with
the Black Death, which created the epidemics that overtook all of Europe. A quarter of human civilization died. A quarter of human civilization died during that period of time from starvation and the plague. I mean, most people's knowledge of history is abysmal. In order to have a clue of what might be coming at us down the road, you got to know what the hell happened before. And most people, I say 536 AD. Does that mean anything to you? No. Well, how about 1816? No. Well, it's not that long ago if you get right
How
down.
about 1980, Mount St. Helens, and we all had those amazing sunsets for 3 months.
Right.
Yeah. So
I was living in Denver then. My former wife was from very close to Mount St. Helens.
Mm-hmm.
And I got sent the company I was working for at the time had me go up and troubleshoot a job in Montana. And I went up there and they were selling little vials of volcanic ash that had blown across from Mount St. Helens. Oh, I mean, hell, we had ash on our car in Denver.
Oh yeah.
You know, I was a paramedic up there in Seattle, and 1993, and even then, we would drive along the Alaskan highway, and you would see what looked like dirty snow, because you've seen what dirty snow looks like when it's pushed to the side of the road. That was actually piles of ash still on the side of the road.
Yeah. So I think one analogy that you could use for why a lot of these places, they left them to go look for greener pasture is Easter Island. Look what those people did to Easter Island, right? They just basically, the term, raped it. It just killed it, right? Because they did not understand. So they build all those great statues and all that stuff, but they just took all the lumber down and just ruined it. Well, same thing could go on in a jungle as well if you're going to do all this building and use all the resources up, and the water may not be as clean as it was, right? And maybe they're not as good as farmers and they depended on what grew there naturally, and then they just ruined it. And Easter Island's a great example of that. Then you move on. Say, well, we screwed it up. Let's move on. Let's go to greener pastures. So it's smart.
I'm sure a lot of that is true.
Which kind of throws it into the face of, how smart were they for them, quote unquote, to be able to build Baalbek and places like that, and yet ruin their environment at the same time, right? And it's like, kind of throws.
You're talking about various epochs, Mark.
Right.
Yeah.
Baalbek probably was built, and I'm just pulling this out of the air, maybe 25,000 years ago. Hey, people that believe that the pyramids of Giza were built 4,500 years ago are wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, like the Sphinx, which shows water erosion that goes back at least maybe 6,000 years ago, when the climate supported excessive rain. Okay, at that time, today, the Sahara Desert was a vast Greenland.
Oh, they show the maps. They've got maps that show that.
Which had one of the largest freshwater lakes on the planet.
Yeah.
And now, what is it?
Well, it's because of our SUVs, Don. Come on.
Yeah, well, climate change. Something changed the climate.
Well, there's also, look, I mean, I wanted to bring up, because the last, what do they call it, Frost Fair was in 1814. If you know anything about Britain, that was when it was so cold that they would build these shops on the Thames River, on the water, it's frozen. And they would have these fairs out there. In 1814, which is only 2 years before the event of 1816. So I think that's odd that was so close together. But also the giant tidal lines in North Africa and the Sahara. When they showed satellite photography, it shows clearly that there is a great deluge of water going across the desert, that you can actually see the lines of the water receding from space.
And that's believed to have been from the result of the Younger Dryas event.
Exactly.
Jimmy Bright, that guy from Bright Insight, okay?
Yep.
Who are you familiar with him, Gary?
No, I don't know him.
He has a YouTube channel where he does a lot.
Oh wait, yes, I know who he is. He was on Joe Rogan. Yes, I know who he is. Yeah.
Okay, and he discovered in Mauritania an area that today is just basically a desert ruin. but, excuse me, it's got all the outlines of what could have been Atlantis. Okay. And at one point, it definitely had a channel to the ocean. And it's in an area which basically follows Plato's description to a T of different colored rocks, elephants there, gold, and other things. And he believes that may have been what is it called, Mark? The Recot structure, I believe.
I don't recall.
I believe it's the Recot structure. But yeah, hey, I'm telling you, we truly don't know what we don't know.
So when Ed Ledsikkanen, I don't know how to say his last name, when he built the Coral Castle twice, they said that he used reverse magnetism or a perpetual motion holder to move those stones that were tons all by himself. And that isn't that long ago. That's in the 40s, right? And we don't have an answer to how he did that. That's in the 40s. It's not thousands of years ago. It's crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go to that place too to check it out.
Yeah, Wolf's gone like twice. He's a huge fan of that guy.
Yeah, it's the gate that amazes me, that it sits on a perfect pivot to where this thing that's heavy as hell. It's like and you can just move it with your finger.
And he built the whole thing, and then he never had
He'd work at night so nobody could see him.
Right. He was lovelorn and packed it all up and moved it and built it again.
Girl jilted him.
Yeah.
For another man. Yeah. And he built this stuff out of his love for her.
Yeah. And then moved it. He built it once and built it a second time, and nobody still knows how he did. Some people say it's ley lines and things of that sort, but one guy, like 5 foot tall, 100 pounds, built that whole thing, and still we don't have anybody in academia interested enough, or maybe they know and they don't want to go look at something like that and say, wow, gee, I think we figured this out.
Well, if you look at our history now, today, we unfortunately inhabit a very politically unstable time in our history, and there are people today that believe, people in positions of authority, I'm sorry to say, that believe that an atomic catastrophic event could happen. Now, everybody thinks that most people, I should say, think that only twice have we deployed and used atomic devices, in Hiroshima, Japan, and Nagasaki, Japan. But guess what? It's also happened in our distant past. One area that Sitchin uncovered in the Middle East, the impact area is still radioactive, and it's believed they were nuclear devices employed and deployed by the Anunnaki. India is another area where a terrible nuclear strike happened that's still to this day dangerously radioactive. Now, I'm flummoxed why nobody ever discusses this. It's one of those inconvenient truths that they want to conceal. And I guess their reasoning is stuff like that is too unstable if people knew that they likely at that time period came from visitors coming to this planet, especially today, in light of the UAP UFO controversy. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back to what we mentioned earlier, and we've talked about it many a time. Is the great reset button? When they hit that reset, humans become too advanced, and we have to restart them because they become dangerous. And this is something, because the Indian book Bhagavad Gita talks about wars, and of course, you brought up the fact that there are traces. And Brandenburg's brought it up that there are traces of what appears to have been an atomic blast in our ancient past, which could only be caused, once again, like with Mars, by a supernova or an atomic weapon because of the residue that it leaves behind.
Well, if it were a supernova, then probably all of humanity would have ended up being extinct, and we wouldn't be having this chat.
And could it be related to the 12th planet?
Well, there are many that believe it is. Now, like I said, those two chief earth gods, Enlil and Enki, okay? Enlil had nothing but disdain for the human race. Enki, on the other hand, was very helpful toward the humans. He basically, in the Sumerian flood myth, because, hey, all these ancient mythology, stuff we're reading in the Bible, the Christian Bible, in the Old Testament, that came out of Sumeria. Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, the Israelites, was originally from Sumeria.
Sumeria, yeah.
Okay. Ur, the city of Ur on the Chaldees, is where he emanated from and moved out. Well, a lot of that I'm sure he took with him. Okay. Now, in the Torah, they talk about Noah, but Sumeria had a version of Noah, probably the first version, who was contacted by his god, probably Enki, to give him a heads up that something was coming and build an ark. Build this boat to put your family on it, your peoples, agricultural stuff, animals, okay, to survive this coming catastrophic event. And this guy did, I can't even begin to try to pronounce his name. I'm just going to call him the Sumerian Noah because his name is a jaw cruncher. But this guy, okay, after it was all said and done, purportedly was rewarded with immortality. Now, this is a very important point. For all intents and purposes, the Anunnaki are extremely long-lived. And I asked Sitchin once, we were having lunch, and I asked him, I said, do you think these beings were truly immortal? And he said, well, think of it like this. He said, you're a dog owner, right? I said, oh, yeah, I've had them all my life. And at that time, I was probably, I was probably 45, 46. And he said, well, how long do your dogs live? And I said, well, in my experience, anywhere between 10 and 14 years. He said, yeah. And you're still here, aren't you? So, how do you think your dogs view you? And I thought about that. And I thought, my God, that guy's got a point. Okay. Now, Gilgamesh, on his final pursuit before he died, okay, before he died, he was on a quest to find I think it was a plant of some type that would give him immortality. See, this was something that the Anunnaki, when they designed us, well, read your Bible. Let us make man in our image. Okay.
You got that. And then also Genesis 6:4, which is there were this is King James version. There were giants in the earth.
The sons
there
of
were
God
giants.
Looked down upon the daughters of man, found them desirable, and went down and took them and did whatever with them.
Yep.
Okay. And they had children, which became the Nephilim, giants, men of renown. Okay.
Which is that's what they're called in the Torah and also in the Catholic Bible. They mentioned
which, by the way, became evil, the Nephilim. They were cannibalistic. Okay. This was one of the reasons, according to the Bible, or according to religious texts, that God hit us with a flood to wipe them out, to get rid of the evil that was pervading the planet. Okay. Now, who knows? Maybe they directed that comet or asteroid into the planet. I don't know. But the bottom line was, yeah, these beings were evil. But Gilgamesh went off on this quest, and he had a series of adventures. And finally, he found that which he was looking for. But at the very end, as he was grabbing for it, according to the text, the story, a snake ate this thing, thus stealing immortality from Gilgamesh. Now, interestingly, before we invaded Iraq back in 2002, 2003, an archaeologist at Eridu discovered a tomb that was believed to be the tomb of Gilgamesh. Now think about that. So what happened to it? Well, that's when the American army invaded Iraq. Okay. The army got to that place, secured it, and dumped everybody out. Now, there were a lot of theories and conspiracies about that. Did they think that maybe some ancient technology might have been buried with them? Was the guy really 12 or 14 foot tall? What do the skeletal remains say, et cetera, et cetera? And we still don't know, okay? Whatever was found, if anything, it's never been disclosed.
Yeah, because they did magnetometry from NASA, and they had discovered something, and it was discovered in 2003, and nothing ever came of it. The research.
Yes. Crazy, crazy business. Yes, sir. Well, I don't know, buddy. That is a crazy, crazy thing. You know what we're going to have to do? We have the capability of it. And I'm going to have to talk to Chanel about this. But, you know, we can take phone calls from the audience. I'm not going to do that tonight, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to talk to Chanel about that, see if she has the technology just sitting there. Oh, she's telling Mark, drop out and come back. He must be having some problems. I'll talk to Chanel about that, and we'll see what, if anything, we need to do to get that in operation. Because I think, oh yeah, Chanel's telling me we can absolutely do that whenever you want. Okay. So, would you want to try it tonight?
If somebody wants to call in, I think that'd be great.
Okay. I've got the phone number here. Let me go to I've got it here. All right.
Now, by the way, I wanted to point out, Piri Reis isn't the only ancient map that was found to depict Antarctica, because you get the Bausch maps too that show a green Antarctica.
Okay, I thought I had it right here. Chanel, if you want to send me the where the heck are we? Yeah, if you want to send me the number real quick, and I'll give it out on the air.
I had the number too, and I can't find it. I guess we haven't done it in a long time. I must have thrown it away.
Yeah, she's checking to see if everything's working.
Oh, it's right there. 855.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And not the number that is on Marcia's screen right now.
855 472 5483. If you'd like to join us on chat, 855 472 5483.
472.
And I will put it into the chat on Rumble. It is now on Rumble.
Okay. There we go. Then we'll find out if we have more than 3 people tuning in. Huh?
There you go. Yeah, I went back to Bright Insight, and the last thing that he posted was a month ago, a short clip of him on Rogan, and then he was active 3 months ago. But I know that he sometimes takes trips. He goes to like other countries and he does his own work.
He's an Army vet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
he's an Army vet, and he served in Iraq.
I'm sure he gets a lot of emails and stuff. I did send out a message to him and said, hey, would you like to come on Don Ecker's show? And I never heard back from him. But again, he probably gets polluted with emails. So I don't take it personal.
Okay.
What trips me out is the gentleman that made that special about ancient catastrophes for Netflix. My buddy Tom and Andre got him on their show on Midnight's Edge, and I've been trying to contact that guy to do your show, and he doesn't respond to anything I send out. I'm like, man, give me an email or a phone number so I can call this guy.
Who is he?
The guy you brought up earlier that did the special on Netflix.
Oh, Graham Hancock.
Well,
Graham Hancock.
Those guys also, they do make money at this, right? So,
well, I met. Okay, he worked for years with Robert Bauval. I met and spoke with Robert Bauval. Okay, and I might have at one point. Spoken to Hancock. Okay, we got our first caller. We got our buddy Chris DePerno. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Hello, nurse.
Oh. Hey, you mentioned that there's some points that are still radioactive in the Middle East and maybe India. What other evidence have we found that there's more advanced civilizations? Because I agree that I think we're not the only civilization that's been on this planet, but what evidence have we found that that has been leaked out to the public?
Did you ever hear UParts, Chris?
No.
Out of place objects that have been found. Archaeological. And a lot of this stuff, after it's found, if it's inconvenient. Okay, inconvenient. They will basically hide in museum basements. For example, earlier I was talking about that gold mine down in South Africa that was discovered that's over 300,000 years old. But what if I told you, and it's true, by the way, metallic spheres or balls, metallic balls have been discovered that are anywhere between 2.2 and 3 billion years old in strata going down that deep. And once again, in South Africa, these things are, well, they're famous. I first heard about them in the book I got back in the early 90s called Forbidden Archaeology. These spheres are metallic. They've got grooves in them. They look like they were machined, but they go back over 2 billion with a B years old. That's some crazy stuff.
It is. It is very crazy stuff. But have we put those things out on display? I mean, is there somewhere in a museum, or have they been hidden from the public?
Well, those metallic spheres have been pretty widely propagated. I mean, there are photographs you can find of those on the web, but a lot of stuff. For example, okay, now here is something else. Giants, okay, in the North America continent have been discovered going back all through the 19th century. And a lot of these bones have been sent or were sent at the time to the then pretty new Smithsonian Institute. They hid them all or destroyed them because of concern that they would somehow adversely impact the Christian Bible. Now, there is a, let me think of where this is. Have you guys heard about the Lovelock Caves?
Yeah.
Where you have?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have.
The Lovelock Caves were supposedly where a group of red-headed giants, as a matter of fact, the Kandahar giant, that story that came out of Afghanistan back around, well, the story first surfaced around 2015, okay, was claimed to have been red-headed. But these giants were living in the American
The Cherokee
continent.
talk of them, the Navajo.
Right. And these giants supposedly hunted man and ate them. They were cannibals. And finally, the Native Americans came together. They found out where these guys were basically bunkered into this huge cave. They filled it up with firewood. Okay. They lit it on fire to smoke them out or to asphyxiate them. And basically, they killed them all. Now, years ago, around the turn of the century, bones from that cave were found that showed giant skeletal remains. So apparently the natives were telling it like they knew it when they finally decided the only way to get rid of these guys is to go in and kill them. And that's what they did. But that's something else that you never, ever hear or read about, or very
Well, if it doesn't
seldom.
fit their narrative, they won't talk about it.
Right.
But
I
some
know.
ancient alien theorists say
Yeah.
Who are they, Chris? Who are they?
Well, what's that?
They always say, some ancient alien theorists say, and I'm like, well, who are they?
Aliens.
Aliens, yeah. Well, we just had a person on UAP Crossfire talk about one of the giants. I guess he was carrying a cow when he came out of the cave, and the only thing they shot him, but the only thing that happened was the cow. He dropped the cow and ran back into the cave, I guess. Remember that, Don?
Yeah. Supposedly a sniper hit him with a 50 caliber Barrett rifle. Now, let me tell you what, that is something you do not want to get on the wrong end of. And this giant apparently didn't knock him down. He took off. So I don't know. That'd be scarier than hell.
Vaporizes human tissue when it hits, because there's so much gases up in front of that round that it just obliterates and vaporizes what it strikes on a human.
Well, guys, great show. I love it. And I'll watch. Thank you for taking my call.
Oh, hey, Chris, I'm glad you were on air, buddy.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. And if you would, let me go back to my old days of Dark Matters Radio. If you would like to join in tonight's conversation, 855-472-5483. And I thought I had that damn thing on my
do not dial
desktop.
867-530-99. Don't call it.
Gary, you're not helping.
Marcia.
You're not helping, dude.
Marcia.
Yeah.
But I actually did share a couple of things, because two things that popped into my head. Once again, thanks to that show that, good or bad, I do watch the show. Ancient Aliens.
It's bad.
And I love the fact that they brought this up, because it was something I'd read about, is the ancient temples that were carved out of solid stone. And I put links in there because they've got the rock-hewn church and the Indian, Kailasa temple, carved right out of solid stone.
Yeah, they refer to real stuff in that show. The problem is it's the name of the show, right? It's always, well, it's probably aliens.
Well, some ancient alien theorists believe, and they never tell us who those theorists are. I think it's the people on the show.
Well, yeah. It's like the ghost shows and the Bigfoot shows and things, right? We're 10 years in, and we're going to show you a ghost tonight. Mm-hmm.
Okay. According to KGRAdb, they're going to close down the lines in the next 5 minutes. So, if you want to pop in before it's all said and done, do it. Do it now.
Do it now. Do it. Get to the chopper.
I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but since this UAP thing broke big, I've noticed many more YouTube channels now that are presenting video clips, and it's really getting polluted with video clips. Most of them are obviously CG or fake, but right. I do notice that in my feed, just more and more channels of, let's take a look at these clips and those clips, and not a real good sign that the uninitiated can just go up there and watch all of this crap. The same problem with the Dr. Jonathan Reed case, or the Cooper case, or the alien autopsy case, or whatever. It's like, my goodness, man, can we just move on from this stuff? But you know what? We're not going to move on from this stuff. No, we aren't.
Well, I'll tell you, tonight, I'm glad, Gary, I'm going to give you kudos there, Mr. Kissel.
Oh my God, it'll
But
be the only time it ever happens.
That's right.
I'm going to give him kudos because mentioning Gobekli Tepe, you hit a real sugary spot for me. I love talking about ancient history.
Well, I'm
I
thinking
really
next
do.
week we should really focus on Sitchin's work
Well, now
during his career.
that's that's something to consider. Yes, yes. Well, he was a dear friend of mine, and I was so saddened. His wife passed before he did, and they were locked at the hip. And after that happened, I could see him just going down the tubes. Oh, well, I just was notified that the phone lines are shut.
They did not pay
You
the bill.
didn't do it. You did not do it.
They didn't pay the bill.
That's too bad because I was going to call. Huh. All right.
I'd like to do that. Actually, call in and like have a freeze image of me on camera, so I can like call in and do a voice. Hello, this is the governor. What are you talking about?
I did that before on Don's last show on the other platform. I would phone in from time to time. Hey, Don.
Yeah, it's Billy down in Tennessee, and we're big fans of UFOs down here. I get abducted every other week.
We had a guy that Mark and I knew real well, Dave Aaron. Dave had a business called the UFO Audio Video Clearinghouse. This is like back in the late 80s, the 90s. As a matter of fact, he used to advertise quite a bit in UFO magazine.
Yep.
And Dave was a character, big time character. And I used to, he would. Now, I loved the guy. I really did. I liked the guy. He was just one of those characters you liked. But he could bring Sergeant Ecker out like you never would believe. And the last time he was on my show, he started ripping into this producer by name, okay, on my show. And all I could see were lawsuits coming down the road at me. And I stopped him in his tracks and said, "Okay, Dave, that's it. You're done." And, and that was the last time I ever allowed him on the show. Then he went crying to Mark, didn't he, Mark?
He did. He said, I don't understand. And I said, Dave, it's not your show. You're making accusations against somebody in public, and it could end up poorly for the show for Don. But it's true. And I said, doesn't matter. Get your own show. And sadly, he was born too late, because if he would have been born 20 years later, he would have had a very fun show, I think, because he was out of his gourd most of the time, and he would have been saying crazy stuff and doing crazy things and dancing on camera and stuff.
Whatever happened to the guy?
He died. But it would have been entertaining, annoying, but entertaining. And I used to call him once or twice a day. And the funniest thing I ever heard wasn't on Don's show, is he got called up by Phil Hendry on KFI, and they called him and said, we want you to appear with like a Star Trek person or something. He was very much into that stuff. But he didn't know that Phil Hendry did all those voices, and he could play like 6 people at the same time on the radio. It was crazy, right? So Dave's on there.
He did an Art Bell that you could not tell the difference from the real freaking Art Bell.
Yes. So he did this kid who was into Star Trek and all that. So he'd do Phil Henry and the kid back and forth. It was crazy. And he starts to call Dave out as an idiot and a dummy because he doesn't like Star Wars as much. And Dave's going to have palpitations. He's getting all upset on the radio. And it gets done and Dave calls me. I couldn't believe it. I said, Dave, it was a come on. He was playing both. No, that trolled. Yeah, he was completely trolled. And one of the best ones I heard that Phil did was he did somebody at like a beach in SoCal as they were seeing Hail Bop come across. And he's like, I can't believe it. And he's playing both these parts, right? And he goes, I can't believe it. Hear it? And it cuts. And he goes, what? Oh, it cut. It cut. and it's like it blew up or something, right? And people were phoning up going, great. Wait a minute. I'm at that beach right now and I don't see a damn thing. Phil Henry,
well, guys,
man,
this I'd love to go another half hour, but we're out of time.
All right.
That's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Cubs win.
Good Lord willing, and the river don't rise next week. In the meantime, have a great week. Thursday, UAP Crossfire. Be there or be square. See you then. Good night.
God bless Sam and Dean Winchester.